I was exhausted, drained from hours of driving through endless stretches of empty highway. The rain started as a drizzle but quickly turned into a downpour, making it nearly impossible to see the road. My gas gauge was blinking on empty, and, to make matters worse, my phone had no signal. I was desperate to find somewhere to stop for the night. Then, through the sheets of rain, I spotted a faint, flickering neon sign on the side of the road, Red Pine Motel. It looked like something out of an old movie mall, run down, barely visible in the storm. But it was my only option. I pulled into the lot, my tires splashing through puddles. The place looked deserted. The building was old, with peeling paint and cracked windows, and the dim lights barely illuminated the lot. I had a bad feeling, but the rain was relentless, and I knew I wouldn't make it much further with my fuel running so low. Taking a deep breath, I grabbed my things and headed inside. A bell jingled above the door as I stepped into the lobby. It was dim and smelled of damp carpet and something stale, like moldy wood. Behind the counter, an older man with a pale face and dark, sunken eyes looked up at me. He didn't smile, didn't say a word, just watched me with an expression I couldn't read. "Do you have any rooms?" I asked, trying to ignore the strange feeling in my gut. He nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving mine. "Just one," he said in a low, raspy voice. "Room 9. It's the last room on the left." He handed me an old, tarnished key with a faded tag that read 9. "Be careful in there," he muttered, almost to himself. "And don't wander around too much at night." That should have been a red flag, but I was too tired to care. I mumbled a quick thanks and made my way down the narrow hallway, my shoes squeaking on the worn carpet. The place was eerily quiet. I couldn't hear the rain anymore, just my own footsteps echoing in the empty corridor. Finally, I reached room 9, the last door on the left. The light above it flickered as I inserted the key, and when I turned the handle, the door creaked open slowly, like it hadn't been used in ages. The room was strange. It was small, with outdated decor and faded wallpaper peeling off in places. A musty smell hung in the air, and the single lamp by the bed cast an eerie yellow glow across the room. There was an old TV in the corner, a stained armchair, and a bed that looked like it had seen better days. I tossed my bag onto the bed and sat down, trying to shake off the unease that had followed me since I walked into the lobby. I told myself I was just tired, that I'd feel better after some rest. I lay down, closed my eyes, and tried to fall asleep. But no matter how I tried, sleep wouldn't come. There was a strange feeling in the room, like I wasn't alone. A faint sound broke the silence, a soft, almost inaudible whisper. I sat up, heart pounding, and looked around the room. The sound stopped, and I told myself it was just the wind, or maybe an old pipe in the wall. But as soon as I lay back down, the whispering started again. This time it was clearer, like someone was standing right by my ear. "Get out," it whispered, barely more than a breath. "Leave. While you can." I shot up, looking around wildly. The room was empty. My heart raced as I checked every corner, but there was no one there. The door was still locked, and the windows were shut tight. I tried to brush it off as my imagination, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. Every shadow seemed to shift. Every creak of the floor felt like footsteps. The air in the room felt heavier, colder. Suddenly, the old TV in the corner flickered to life. It crackled with static, casting a pale light across the room. I hadn't touched the remote, and it had been off when I entered. My breath caught as an image started to form on the screen, a dark hallway, the same one I had walked down to reach room 9. The camera moved slowly, panning down the hallway, closer and closer to my door. My chest tightened as I realized what was happening. The camera stopped right outside room 9, and then, as if whoever was holding it was listening to my thoughts, it turned toward my door. I bolted out of bed and turned off the TV, breathing heavily. But even with it off, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. My eyes darted to the door, and that's when I saw its shadow of someone standing just outside, barely visible under the crack of light at the bottom of the door. I froze. Whoever or whatever was out there just stood still, unmoving, like they were waiting. I backed away, my pulse racing, but I didn't hear footsteps, just the low, steady hum of the rain outside. I thought about calling for help, but something told me that wouldn't do any good. The whole place felt wrong, like it was separated from the real world, like no one would hear me even if I screamed. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the shadow under the door disappeared. I waited, listening for any sound, but there was nothing, only silence. I didn't dare open the door, so I backed away, feeling trapped. After what felt like hours, I finally lay back down, though I kept my eyes wide open, alert to every creak and shadow. Just when I started to calm down, thinking maybe I'd imagined the whole thing, I heard it again, a soft, slow scraping sound, like nails dragging against the walls. The sound was coming from right outside the window. My heart stopped. I forced myself to look, and there, just outside the glass, was a face. Pale, ghostly, with empty eyes staring directly at me. It pressed against the window, unblinking, and a twisted smile stretched across its face. I screamed, stumbling back, my eyes glued to the face in horror. But then, as quickly as it had appeared, it was gone, fading into the night as if it had never been there at all. That was it. I wasn't staying a second longer. I grabbed my things, flung the door open, and ran down the hall, not daring to look back. The lobby was empty, the old man nowhere to be seen. I left the key on the counter and dashed outside into the rain, sprinting to my car. I drove away from that place as fast as I could, not looking back. I didn't care about the rain, the empty gas tank, or the fact that I had no idea where I was going. I just needed to get as far away from the Red Pine Motel as possible. Even now, I still don't know what I saw that night or if it was all in my head. But sometimes when I close my eyes, I can still see that face at the window, smiling back at me with those empty eyes. And I know one thing for sure, he'll never stop at a motel on the side of the road again. I'd been driving all night, desperate for a place to rest. When I finally saw the Sunset Inn off the highway, I pulled over without a second thought. The place was old and empty, with a flickering neon sign and peeling paint, but I was exhausted, and it was the only motel for miles. The woman at the front desk handed me a key labeled Room 13. "We're almost fully booked tonight," she said, though I hadn't seen any other cars in the lot. She gave me a strange look as I turned to leave. And, "Don't leave the room after midnight." I nodded, not sure if she was joking, and headed down the hall. Room 13 was at the end of a long, dim corridor. The wallpaper was old, the floor creaked, and the lights flickered. I opened the door and stepped inside. The room was surprisingly clean, with a made-up bed, a small TV, and a faint smell of lavender. But there was an eerie feeling in the air, something I couldn't quite place. I brushed it off as nerves, locked the door, and lay down, hoping to finally get some sleep. I drifted off quickly, but a loud knocking woke me up. I glanced at the clock, 12:15 a.m. "Hello?" I called, but there was no answer. The knocking came again, this time louder and more insistent. I got out of bed, heart pounding, and peered through the peephole. The hallway was empty. Just as I backed away, the knocking started once more, even more intense. Against my better judgment, I unlocked the door and pulled it open. No one was there. The hallway was dark and silent. I was about to close the door when I noticed something strange, a piece of paper on the floor right outside my room. It looked old, yellowed with age, and a message was scrawled in messy handwriting. "Stay in your room. Do not let them in." A chill ran down my spine. I quickly shut the door, locked it, and backed away. I didn't know who had left that note, but I wasn't about to test the warning. Just as I lay back down, I heard the knocking again, louder than before. This time, there was a voice, a soft, pleading, "Please, help me. Let me in." The voice sounded like a child, frightened and alone. I felt a surge of pity, but I remembered the note. My instincts told me to stay put, so I stayed in bed, covering my ears and closing my eyes, hoping it would stop. The knocking grew desperate, and the voice turned into a faint whisper, repeating, "Let me in, please." Minutes passed, then silence. I held my breath, waiting, but there was nothing more. I lay awake the rest of the night, too scared to move. In the morning, I hurried to check out, hoping to put the whole experience behind me. As I handed the key to the woman at the desk, she looked at me with a sad smile. "Room 13, she murmured, almost to herself. "Not many people stay in there twice. They all hear. Him." "Him?" I asked, shuddering. She only nodded. "A boy who disappeared years ago. They never found him, but some say his spirit is still searching, always knocking, trying to find a way back inside." I left without another word, grateful to leave room 13 and its knocking ghost behind forever. I had been traveling all day, exhausted and craving a place to sleep. When I saw a sign for Lakeview Inn, a small rustic-looking motel on the outskirts of town, I didn't hesitate to pull over. Inside, an elderly man greeted me with a tired smile. "Need a room?" he asked, his voice raspy but kind. "Yes, please. Just for the night," I said, yawning. He nodded, reaching behind the counter for a key. "Room 7 is open," he said, handing it to me. "It's at the end of the hall." "Thanks," I mumbled, barely registering the warning he muttered under his breath. "And, don't look in the mirror after midnight." I thought I misheard him. "What?" He cleared his throat. "Just a bit of motel lore, I suppose. The mirror in room 7. Folks say it's best to avoid looking into it at night." I chuckled nervously. "Thanks for the advice." As I walked down the narrow hallway, the air grew cooler, and the flickering lights overhead made everything feel just a little eerie. When I unlocked room 7, it was plain and clean, with a bed, a small dresser, and an old TV. But what caught my eye immediately was the large antique mirror hanging on the wall across from the bed. The mirror looked old, with an ornate frame and a slight, unsettling fog over the glass. I could barely see my reflection through the haze. I shrugged it off and got ready for bed, trying to ignore the old man's strange warning. I lay down, the mirror right in my line of sight. Exhausted, I drifted off quickly. Around midnight, I woke up with a start, feeling like something had roused me. The room was pitch black, and for a second, I had forgotten where I was. Then, in the darkness, I saw it mirror. In the faint glow from the streetlight outside, I could see something strange in the reflection. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light, but when I looked closer, my blood ran cold. My reflection was different. It was still me, but it wasn't moving the same way I was. I raised my hand, but the reflection lagged, slowly following after me like it was underwater. And then, it smiled a strange, twisted smile that I definitely wasn't making. I felt a shiver run down my spine. I wanted to look away, but I was transfixed, watching as my own reflection started moving independently. The me in the mirror tilted its head, looking at me with a sinister grin. My heart raced, and I backed away, only to see my reflection step forward, pressing its hand against the glass as if trying to break through. Suddenly, it mouthed something, 3 words I couldn't quite make out, but then it repeated them, clearer this time. "Let me out." I stumbled back, nearly tripping over the bed, and scrambled for the light switch. When I flicked it on, the reflection was gone. The mirror showed only my pale, terrified face, staring back at me as if nothing had happened. I grabbed my bag and bolted out of the room, not caring about the time or the fact that I hadn't checked out. I was halfway to my car when I heard a voice call out behind me. "Leaving so soon?" It was the old man from the front desk, watching me with an expression that was somewhere between understanding and pity. "Something was in that mirror," I managed to say, my voice shaking. He sighed, nodding slowly. "I know. Some say it's a lost soul. Others say it's a trick the mirror plays to lure people in. But whatever it is, it's been in room 7 for as long as I've worked here." He paused, looking me in the eye. "Not many people listen to my warning." Without another word, I got into my car and drove off, never looking back. Even now, whenever I catch a glimpse of myself in a mirror, I can't help but wonder if that reflection, with its sinister, twisted grin, is still out there somewhere, waiting for another chance to be let out.